Welcome to another episode of Million Dollar Stories, where we get to interview authors from all over the world. As you guys know, I love working from my apartment. I will never build a business where I actually have to go somewhere consistently. I'm thinking about building a virtual event studio for the whole reason of being able to put on massive events from, 100 feet away. So that's my plan. And an individual who shares my sentiment for being able to work wherever, whenever is this individual named Allie Green. And I'm going to read off her bio from Amazon. Allie Green has been working remotely since 2014, 10 years. That's so awesome. She was previously the director of people operations for DuckDuckGo. Have you guys heard of that? Yes, we do like DuckDuckGo. And was the former head of culture and community at Oyster, where she hosted their distributed discussions podcast. Ali was named a remote accelerator in the 2022 Remote Influencer Report by Remote, a global EOR company and community for remote workers. Ali's mission is to empower people and companies, helping them thrive and making work and life better. And the book that we're talking about today, let's go back to it. It is Remote Work. You guys out there, if you're starting a business, you could just pull out your laptop and start to serve people all over the world. So I think it's in your best interest to do this, whether it's part-time or maybe even get out of that corporate job and start a business, because I think entrepreneurship is the pathway to freedom. So the book is Remote Works, Managing for Freedom, Flexibility, and Focus. Thank you so much for being here, Allie Green.
Thank you so much for having me. And wow, 10 years. It's making me start to feel a bit old.
10 years. What happened? Let's go back to the genesis of you becoming a digital nomad. So before we start talking about the book, what sets you on this path that you're on?
Yeah, so it seems a little bit of a cliche story. I think I was privileged enough to have a little bit of a quarter life crisis. But I had been working and living in New York City, and the definition of the rat race was my life. I was doing the walk to catch one subway, to squeeze myself onto another subway, to, get into my office at 8 a.m. because it's New York, so you hustle harder there. And it was just such a tiring life. And so I liked having my friends there. My work was interesting, but I felt like I didn't know who I was or what my purpose was outside of getting into the office at 8 a.m., leaving at 6 p.m., and trying to find enough energy to do one thing personally before waking up and doing it all again the next day. And so the hamster wheel feeling was real for me. And, this was a long time ago. And so in my youth, I couldn't quit this really amazing job. I felt very successful unless I had something really cool to do instead. And the cool thing at that time was to backpack around South America. And so I joke I traded in Madison Avenue for Machu Picchu. Um,
That's awesome.
because you got to get the pics. This was before the gram, but still, it was like I'm gonna do this adventure experience, learn more about myself, and then I guess I'll try normal life again. But while I was traveling, a few lucky things happened to me. So one, the role I had in my organization, it turned out that I could work as a consultant instead, and they were keen to still have me on board, and I didn't necessarily need to keep living or being in the office once I went that route. And so I was able to navigate working with that company still as a client, but not necessarily living in New York City. And so I went back and spent some time with my family in Michigan. I moved to Philadelphia, and really like dove into remote work under the lens of you know client consultant relationship. The other thing that happened while I was backpacking around South America is I met somebody who was actually doing their work traveling, and I was like, oh yeah, I'm doing a little bit of that because like I'm keeping up with my emails, but like you do all of your work like this, like tell me more. And that's when I was really introduced to the digital nomad lifestyle. And I gave it a go to live in a city properly for another year after that experience before just deciding like I wanted to travel the world and I wanted to have all these different experiences, and work shouldn't stand in the way of that.
Wow. It's awesome. Yeah. So you had a taste of it and you're like, all right, I'm never going back. That's it. That's
Exactly.
great. Yeah. It's basically sitting in that cubicle, or I was in the corporate world for a little bit. And I remember having the biggest month ever, right? I think it was right around 17 or $15,000 in a month. And at that time, it was the biggest chunk. Like it was everything to me. I'm like, oh my God. And I remember thinking to myself, yeah, but I'm still miserable. How am I still miserable? Oh, it's because I hate what I do. That means money is not the answer. It's freedom, it's purpose, it's being able to have no restraints. And it seems like you share that sentiment. So let's go to the book,
Exactly.
though. Let's go to the book. Remote Works. You're talking about 33 ratings, all 5-star. It's resonating with the audience. And I love the look of it. I love the title of it. Can you tell us about the genesis of this?
Yeah, so I love our like meet cute story for how the book came to be. So I wrote it with a good friend of mine, my co-author Tam Sanderson. She and I actually met while we were both digital nomads in Cape Town. And so our friendship and remote work is intertwined with one another. And so at this time, both of us had full-time jobs for remote organizations. She was at Automatic, which at the time was one of the largest fully remote companies. I was working at DuckDuckGo. And so we really bonded over how working for these companies fills our cup from a professional standpoint, from an intellectual standpoint, and also we got to travel, and we met in Cape Town for the first time, and had a cup of coffee and walked along the beach in the middle of the afternoon in between work meetings. And so it was just this very like special, like, why can't more people live this way? This was back in 2017. And we kept in touch. We did a few personal projects with each other. And it was around the time that the first big news around COVID hit. And I hate talking about COVID at this point, but it really was a genesis for people to learn new things about themselves. And what we learned about ourselves is we didn't want remote work to fail. And we thought that during this time, there was just all this news and all this hype around, oh, all these office jobs are going to be work from home because of the pandemic. But people had no idea how to work remotely. And our biggest fear at that time was if people don't learn how to do this properly, companies are going to force their employees back to the office. We'll probably get into that later. And if that happens, people aren't get to, they're not going to be able to live their lives and define success in a way that resonates for them. So, being a digital nomad or not, we've had opportunities to travel. We've had opportunities to spend extra time with family members. We've had opportunities to meet interesting people and fill our personal cup, go to that midday yoga class, all because of remote work. And there's, things as kind of luxurious as being able to go to a long midday gym class. And there's things as serious as people navigating childcare and navigating, wanting to work and having certain disabilities that prevent them from getting into an office. And so big or small, we realized having more freedom should just be the future of work, but it's not going to be unless people learn a new skill set. And
Yeah.
that's why the book was so important to us.
Mm. Yeah. Managing for freedom, flexibility, and focus. Who doesn't want that, right? That's amazing. Freedom. That's what we all pursue, right? And I think that
Yeah.
not many people obtain it. And it's probably because they don't understand, I guess it's the rich dad as compared to the poor dad mentality. Have you read that book at all?
Yes, of course.
Yeah, it's a staple for us for sure. And I think that once you realize that you can create the life as long as you understand finances and you have a financial IQ that's above the average person, that the school teaches you for a reason. They don't want you to learn about money because then you are totally self-reliant. And once you see it, you'll never unsee it. And I think wherever there's chaos, there's opportunity. And us entrepreneurs, all we do is solve problems. And we just fall in love with that because it usually rewards us and those around us. So uh, let's start off with, or let's go into the DuckDuckGo story. How did you get on board with this company? Because this is the combatant against Google, right? And so I know what you stand for. Your core values are on display for sure by working with this company. How did that all come about?
Yeah, that was a really amazing organic experience in my career for sure. So I had just returned from all of this backpacking in South America. I looked at the map of the US and was like, yes, I really want to live in Philadelphia. That sounds great. Um, I'll be near New York and I'm doing some work still in New York, so I can pop in for some on-site workshops and things of that nature. And so I was getting settled in Philly and I was really into the startup scene. I've always been sort of like, before going off on my own and writing this book and having this experience, like an entrepreneur. I loved working at startups and having opportunities to build within a company. And at that time, I wasn't necessarily certain that I was going to travel. So location flexibility wasn't necessarily the most important thing, but time flexibility was core to what I wanted. And I was like, I want to work for a company where I care about what they do, they care about what they do, they treat their employees like adults, and they know that if everybody's on board with how the work gets done and what the point of it all is, that people will just be engaged and successful, and that will feel like a very interesting intellectual challenge. And I think that is for people that don't necessarily want to go down a path of entrepreneurship, you can't ask for a better company than the one that I just described. It doesn't exist that often, unfortunately. Still, like my hope for the world is that people can choose to be an employee if they want, and they're treated with a level of respect that I think you deserve as a human adult. But I remember at the time, like looking at other companies, and I was talking about time flexibility, and it just really wasn't a thing back then. And then I met the CEO of DuckDuckGo, Gabe, and we just had this really amazing conversation about company culture. And if you challenge people in the right way and they feel like they're part of the team, they're adults and they can get the job done. And I was really on board with what he had to say, and was their first people operations hire to focus on taking that very sort of laissez-faire structure in a way, in terms of we don't care where you are, just get your work done
Yeah, right.
mentality, to also a very like structured scientific culture that DuckDuckGo has. And I really appreciate it in terms of like experiment and iterate. And so being able to work in that environment and build up a people operations team and scale culture was a really just amazing experience for me. And the bonus of all of this is, while they were kind of headquartered in the greater Philadelphia area, the work was fully remote. And so that's really when my travel bug went into full force.
Yeah, there's nothing holding you back, right? And if you
Exactly.
have the freedom, if you, I don't know if you have no relationships, right? No kids, right? You have this freedom to be like, all right, let me get it in now, right? Whenever I can do all this stuff. So really significant. I think that, and so what age were you whenever you went out on your, like when you started to really embrace the entrepreneurial drive? A lot of people come to me, and 22 is whenever it really bit me. And I said, I needed to make a move now because it's probably going to take me 10 years. So what age did it really hit you? And you're like, it's time.
Yeah. For you know what? I actually don't know if it's fully hit me yet. I think in some ways I'm an accidental entrepreneur. But definitely I think that eagerness in me existed in hindsight since high school. Like I always wanted to have a lot of autonomy and a lot of self-agency in the work that I did. And I was always seeking out opportunities, even when I was, a young kid, of what are ways that I can learn about business. I competed in business competitions. How can I like work for a company, and what are the improvements they can make? Or like, how would I do this if this was my thing? So I always like had that sort of way of questioning things in the back of my mind. In 2020 is when I first started, writing the book and consulting with companies and doing workshops. And it was that first taste of what does this look like, to fully create a business, and what do I want that to mean for me? And I'm still reevaluating that, I think, which is the really cool way of being a business owner, is like, do I still like these things? Is this way of earning, revenue still what feels like it matches my values at the most? How do I want to actually be spending my time? And like, what are the engagements with clients look like for me? Do I even want clients anymore? Do I want to do something else? I think the spirit of an entrepreneur is that in some ways you never stop questioning. So I think I'm on the journey alongside everyone else.
So it's been in you for a long time. One thing that I've realized is that many people struggle with the freedom aspect in the first couple of years, right? Because they grew up in school where everything was structured, and then they get out of school and they go into a job and that's structured, right? So for
Mm-hmm.
the very first time, possibly, they are in control of their schedule, which means there's a self accountability that is required. There's no boss, there's no teacher, there's nobody that's saying it has to be done by this time. You are in control of it. So there's an adjustment period. And I remember even myself like struggling with them, like, okay, how often do I work? Am I working too much? I remember writing on pieces of paper in front of me make sure you eat. Like I had a checklist of eating, right? Because I just get into the zone. This is back in the day when there was no money coming in. So I was so focused on growing the business, I forgot about everything else. But you lose balance, you lose all kinds of these standards, sleep schedule, everything. So there's an adjustment period. But once that's over with and you kind of find your rhythm, there is no way you can go back. It's very much like Plato's allegory of the cave. You see it for the first time, this life, what's possible, what's real. There's no way you're going back down in the cave and chaining yourself to the wall. So did you fight that a little bit? And do you see other people fight that?
I personally had this really amazing university experience that is quite different from a lot of my peers, where I got that taste of freedom really early. And then also working in a startup environment quite young. While it was a co-located business, there were 3 or 4 offices around the city that I lived. There were people on the ground, people on the West Coast. And so nobody was necessarily paying attention to like which office hub I was sitting in. I just was getting my work done. So I felt like I got a taste of that in one of my first experiences in the workforce. And it wasn't until I hit my second one where I did have that structure that people usually face, where I was like, oh, I can't do this. I've never been someone into routine, and structure feels like a prison to me. And I even still like, if a place looks too much like an office or a school environment, I tend to want to rebel and not work there. So I make sure I work from very beautiful locations. Like I like going to cafes with lots of plants and things like that. Um, I didn't realize that it's a skill set to be able to operate like that until I started talking to other people and hearing that they have challenges of like, oh, I'm just sitting in my house all day and I don't know how to structure myself. So I'm just working all the time, but it feels like things aren't getting done. Um, and I think a lot of entrepreneurs struggle with boundaries. They struggle with how to infuse their life values into their work. And one of my favorite chapters in the book, we talk about managing your energy, not your time. And the lesson there is, I think that to be successful when you have so much freedom, you need to unlearn things that you
Oh,
think about yourself. You
yep.
might think that you're a morning person, because how many articles have you read that the best CEOs wake up before 5 a.m. and they do X, Y, and Z thing
I
before they
used to
sit
be
down to
that.
their office?
I used to think that I was. I am not.
Yeah. And like you wake up early to go to school, you wake up and like have this set of things on this checklist throughout your day that you need to get done. And so society makes us believe that to be productive, you're more productive in the daytime. That's not true. I'll speak for Tam, my co-author. She's the classic night owl. Like she has these brilliant ideas in the middle of the night sometimes and works and just gets all of this amazing content created and all these ideas out there. And like we've been able to really utilize time zones in our benefit that way, because I'll just wake up feeling energized by all these ideas that came through in the night because we're on different time zones. And so once you start to realize like, hey, our body has a certain way of operating, and that's inherently different from someone else. What are the peak times where you feel productive? How much sleep do you need? When do you need to be physical and like work out and get energy in your body before you can work out your mind? What environments do you like to be in? So this is something I also think is like quite funny in entrepreneurs and people in general. Remote workers don't think about this, because in an office setting, they design the space. You're going there and it's not in your control. Um, I just said, like, I like to work in these beautiful locations, cafes with plants. My partner, he needs to be in, like, we call it his cave. It needs to be silent. He needs to have a comfortable seat to sit at, and that's it. I like to listen to music. So even unlearning rules that you have for yourself, in order to be productive, I need to be sitting at a desk. That's not true. It's only true if you want it to be. And so people really need to spend time learning how they feel engaged in their work so that they can be as successful as possible.
You seem like a self-development junkie like me. Do you read all the Jordan Petersons and all that?
I probably should.
So he says that when you have this self-awareness check, you will start to analyze some things that you really don't like about yourself, and they have to go, right? And so when you start to do that, once again, you start questioning and question, where did this come from? Where did this belief come from? How did I adopt this? Why am I so weak? Why am I not this dream version of myself? And then you realize that a lot of you, most of you, maybe 95% of you has to die off. And then you're left with dead wood. or it's all dead. You're mostly dead wood, but you're left with 5% good, healthy wood, right? So you are you are healthy to some degree, and that is whenever you have your awakening. Okay, I have a little bit of life. I have a little bit of meat on the bone here. Let me build up according to this. Where do I really want to go? So most of you has to die in order for you to really live. I guess that's the best way to put it.
I love that. The way I think about it is people have a lot of fear. And so it's easy to make excuses of why you haven't changed your behaviors or your routine because it's scary to jump into that change. And what's gotten you so far in your life are all of those old behaviors, but those old behaviors aren't going to get you to your next destination.
Yeah, the great saying, what gets you here will keep you here. Oh,
Yeah.
it's great. So whenever I first started to make some money, I realized, okay, what would I be happy with that would be read in my dream obituary, right? So I forgot about the money and I thought about how could I serve the world? How could I help people? What could I be remembered as that I'm
I
very
love
proud of?
this.
And so that's whenever I had the idea of, okay, even if I don't make money with helping people tell stories and write books, I'm going to be damn proud of it. And it's going to lead to an amazing life. So that is what put me on this path, and it changed everything. And it was, I guess you could say, a problem in my life that I solved. How do I get a book done? How do I promote it? How do I use it to generate attention and credibility and leads? And so I started offering it to other people, and it kind of spiraled out of control. And here we are serving tons of people now. Not out of control, it's in control, but it's amazing to see where that takes you based off of get out of your own way, stop focusing on your own needs, your money, your gas bill, your mortgage, and think about what do you want to be known as and who can you help. So where do you say to start?
So for myself, I would say at the core of all of this is getting people to ask more questions about the world that we live in, question why we're doing things. I like to shake things up. Um, and hearing other people's answers helps me think about the world differently as well. I think especially amongst knowledge workers, there's already a certain level of privilege that, oh, you should just be happy. You should just, work and live your life. Your life is pretty good. But what if everybody's lives could be even better? And that's what drives me is how do we make sure that people can define their version of success their own way? Like, why are things important to people? And those people should have more of that instead of assuming there's a status quo for everybody. And so, one of the things that at the end of my life would make me very happy is if people ask more the question why, and also that they define success for themselves. They don't let other people define success for them.
Oh, it's top five regrets of the dying. Have you read that book at all? Have you heard of it?
I have heard of it. I haven't read it yet. And now I'm
Well,
getting like a lot of lists for my
I
book for
know.
like
Oh
my
my
next
God.
reads,
You
which
got to
is
stop traveling and
perfect.
start reading more.
I
No.
know because I was just sitting down going through a rabbit hole of research of what to read next. And now I have two great suggestions.
Oh, those are great. So, in top five regrets of the dying, for anybody listening, the number one regret that most people have on their deathbed is they haven't lived a life true to themselves. So that's it, right? I mean, when you're on that deathbed and you're thinking, man, I wish I would have went after that dream or wrote that book or started that business or talked to that girl or talked to that guy, all of a sudden you realize what's really valuable in your final days. It's not the corporate job and sticking around because it's what your friends and family hoped you would do. It's because you lived your life, and that is really what matters. So, and I think that's crucial because if you have this dream in Philadelphia or New York City or on that subway, and you would listen to your friends and family, many of them would probably say, don't do that. That's crazy. There's no security. What if it fails? What if you mess up? What if you look like a fool in front of people? What if you go into severe debt? And then there's people like us that say, yeah, but what if we fly? What happens then? Right? What if we learn to fly?
I
So,
love that. And it resonates so much with me because when I say, oh, yeah, I'm going to quit this job, I'm going to leave New York City, I want to be a digital nomad, I'm going to travel to a different country every month. And people would ask me, like, when are you going to come back? Or like, how long is this sabbatical going to be? Or like, what about these other goals in your life? And I'm like, why do they have to be mutually exclusive goals? And now, all these years later, the same people are like, that's so cool that you did that. Like, we're so proud of you. It's like, Yes, thank you. Um, and so it is really important, I think, also just to celebrate your own journey and doing it in your own way.
Damn right. You become an inspiration for those around you. It's so true, right? First, you look like a fool, but in order to be the master, you must first learn to play the fool,
The
right? And
hero's journey.
the hero's journey, 100%, right? You go from an ordinary world, you have this call to adventure, you go into the secondary world that's completely unfamiliar to you. It's dangerous. You get tested, you find that dragon. The dragon may hurt you big time. And then you slay the dragon, you get the gold, and then eventually you go back and you help those become free in every shape and form. So that's awesome. So in this book, do you outline maybe a pathway to take, whether it's through Fiverr or through finding job opportunities that I guess you could say put you on the path of being a digital nomad? What's the solution here? Do you have like I see you have a forward by the CEO of WordPress. I mean, there are certain ways you can go about it by blog writing, by I've seen videographers. I have a videographer in a different country. So what do you recommend as the step one if they pick up this book?
Yeah, so the book is really designed already for managers in organizations that have some level of remote work incorporated into it. So whether it's, hybrid or fully distributed. And the reason why we focused on this group specifically is because we think those are the champions of change within organizations that already exist. In terms of finding these opportunities, there's also tons of amazing resources out there. I recommend jobs like Remotive. And we work remotely, and remote.com is like really great places to start if you want to go into the path of being on the employee employer side of things, but also of course this lifestyle and these skill sets opportunities open yourself up to own your own business, run your own business, be a freelancer, have a side hustle. And so I think the best things that you'll learn when reading Remote Works is things like how to structure your time, how to think about like the flexibility that you now have and what you want to do with it, how to set expectations with the people you work with. And so whether it's clients or whether it's partners or whether it's your boss, how do you set your own boundaries and have them learn about the ways in which you work? And also, like, we have so many things available to us in today's age of technology. And I could rattle off probably like a dozen products right now that people use to enhance their business operations. But how do you streamline that from a human perspective? Is another chapter I really like in the book, where we talk about your digital house. Um, you know that when you enter the kitchen, you're probably going to cook or eat, and you're not going to do that when you enter the bathroom. How do you do that with the virtual world of things that you're using to help you not have so much mental overhead so that you can be more efficient, be more effective, get that money coming in without spending too much of your time navigating what message goes where, what tool do I use to do this automation, how do I set up the best processes? So instead of giving people the answers on a silver platter, because we also recognize that everyone's situation is unique, it's figuring out the questions to ask yourself to make your own game plan.
Oh, it's great. Yeah, because people can just get lost and where do you start? But basically start looking at this like a house. That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
And I think even if you start to manage, maybe for the very first time, if they start thinking in these terms, you build the schedule that you want. What would your perfect average day look like? We just did a book called The Perfect Average Day. And so do you see yourself waking up and going for a run? Do you see yourself easing into your day? What would you like to do for 4 hours, right? So imagine, so it's almost like you reverse it, right? Forget about the money. You know how we go to school and then we get a job? It's always like, what's the pay first, right? You don't ask,
Mm-hmm.
what's the schedule look like? What's the pay? Is it worth it? Well, this is, let's build a schedule and then let's focus on the money. Ooh, it's good. So, is there a book outside of your own book that you recommend? Maybe that got you on this path. Maybe I think you might have referenced one, but any ones that you can share with our audience that can get them to kind of fall in love with this outside of your own book.
Yeah. So I'm going to start with fiction because I think this is probably the most inspiring book. And for those who might have read it in school, you're going to get a flashback. But the book The Giver is a book that I read on repeat every other year
Oh,
because reading about a dystopian world is the perfect way to start questioning the world that we currently live in. I'm seeing how you would do things differently if you had more control over your own life, which as an entrepreneur, hopefully you do. And so that is a book that I think a lot of people laugh off, because I mean, I read it for the first time in elementary school, and all these years later, it's something that I still consistently go back to. There's another book that I've been having a lot of fun with in terms of I like books that are highly interactive. And so Embrace Your Weird is another book that I
Wow.
think helps you lean into being more creative and not silencing that part of yourself that you think is like different or awkward or unique. And so I've been having a lot of fun. There's a lot of activities in that book. So it's been pretty cool to go through and to try to more embrace my weird, though. I think I'm pretty comfortable doing that already, but you can always be better.
Yeah, you definitely embrace the 4-hour work week mentality though, right? That is it.
I mean, I forget which economist this was, but there was someone who predicted that post-industrial revolution technology would have us all enjoying the leisure era, but instead we just created a keeping up with the Jones mentality where we wanted to make more, earn more, spend more. And so we're sort of trapped in our own creation of these systems that we've built in society, even though technology can also be used to help us all spend less time doing tactical work, more time being strategic, and then more time with our personal passions. So I do think that societal change is starting to happen as you hear more people talk about their own journeys leaving the workforce or challenging the status quo.
Hmm.
And now I
Yeah,
need to find the economist that wrote about this because it's one of my like favorite articles that I have bookmarked somewhere. And then there's situations like this where I'm like, oh, I want to reference that, and I can't remember who exactly it was.
well, that's true though, because I've been in many circles, and it's wild how some circles are all about, all right, have whatever you want, but you don't need the latest and greatest car every year. You don't need the $100,000 watch, right? If you can be happy with less, you win, right? And so the way I look at it, what I'm looking for is freedom. Yes, I live in an apartment, but I could go out and buy a house. But to me, I'm giving up a little bit of freedom to have this bigger house. And until that there's enough money or enough people to help out with the house, you eventually are you trading, right? You're trading maybe status for and you're trading freedom and I guess you could say a small level of living to maybe status, but chains of society. And that's something I want to stay away from. So, like car payments and all that other stuff. Like the moment I'm able to the moment I went debt free, it was like I can be who I want to be. I can help clients that I really want to help. There's no chains forcing me to do something that I don't want to do anymore. And I think that is sort of like a fire that's always around, like, hey, that might be cool to go and do that, but the moment you do it, you might fall back into that trap of trying to keep up with the Joneses. And so the moment you can have that self-awareness and stay away from it and know which path to take at all times, you have this energy about you that you can't be swayed by the devil, if you will. Pretty cool.
Exactly. And it all goes back to how do you define success in your life and why do you want things? Why do you want to experience things? Why are they important to you? And I think people asking themselves those questions can decide, like, hey, it's more important to me that I spend my money on experiences. And therefore, I can have more basic things like an apartment or a basic car. And other people might, say, hey, I really value cultivating a sense of home and having this feeling of retreat at the end of the day or the end, where I feel like I'm at my most vulnerable and at my most safe. And so those people might choose to spend money on, creating a home that fits that vibe, but both people know why they want it. And I think that's why it's important.
Yeah. And I wouldn't say get a basic car. I'm still a Jeep Wrangler guy. I just don't need the most recent version of a Jeep Wrangler or a Mustang guy or a Viper. So I don't want to sound like a hypocrite. I still like unique stuff. It's just that you don't need
You know
brand
your
new.
level of comfort, lean
I
into
know.
it.
I know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just know yourself. And it sounds like that's where you start too. Know yourself. And the moment you have that type of clarity, you have an identity and other people can sense it. And then you have these standards that are internal and external for others to see.
I was literally just talking about like my life non-negotiables, and while to other people they might seem luxury or they might seem privileged, to me it's what I know I need to be my most happy, and therefore I'm going to create a life for myself where they're like part of my budget. And that's to me something that I'm not necessarily willing to try to make compromises on at this stage of my life. And as my life changes, those priorities can change. But right now there are things that I know for my emotional, physical, mental health, they're things that I want to spend my money on. And so I think it's very empowering to be as bold to say this is my life non-negotiable.
One moment that stands out in your life is sort of like the pinnacle so far. Can you just describe that? Because I want to put people in your shoes. And the story that always comes to mind when I think of a moment when I felt like I made it to a certain degree was, and I didn't, by the way, I wasn't even financially secure, but I built a business. I had clients all over the United States. And I said, you know what? I'm going to do a Jeep around America tour to visit some of my clients. And I remember sitting in Yellowstone National Park at 4 in the morning. I woke up because I knew I had to drive 12 or 14 hours that day. And I remember hearing Tom Petty playing on the radio, and it was in the middle of Yellowstone National Park. I don't know if you've ever been there, but you don't see cars for miles and hours. Like you are in the middle of nowhere, especially in the middle of the night. And tears were coming down my face. I hate to say it in front of all the listeners, but tears. It was that much joy. So that stands out as like a highlight. Do you have anything like that?
I think like this is such a regular day in comparison. I wasn't anywhere as naturally beautiful. But actually just a couple of weeks ago, I don't live in a city. And so I was in the nearest city where I spend a lot of time when I'm not traveling. And I was walking around and I just had this moment of like deep gratitude of like, if tomorrow I want to go to like, I don't know, Denmark, or if I want to go to Mexico, I can do that. And if I don't choose to do that, I also am just right here. And this is pretty cool too. And I'm happy like just being here as well. And so it's sort of like my digital nomad life has changed throughout the 10 years I've been doing this, where there's been times where every month I was in a different country. And I was like, yes, this is like the most exciting time of my life. It was also very exhausting. And then, you know, during the COVID era, I obviously wasn't traveling at all. And I was like, but I'm somewhere of my own choosing. And that feels really special. I don't live here because it's where I was born. I don't live here because it's where I graduated university. I don't live here because my job. I live here because I want to be here. And so having that moment the other day and feeling that gratitude for me was it.
Ooh, it's great. Yeah. It's that autonomy. I'm choosing my life, and there's no replacement for that. There's
Yeah.
no drug you can take. There's no amount of money that somebody can buy you off with. It's beautiful. Autonomy. It's great.
Yeah.
So,
And this
guys,
idea of like personal agency is like just at
what's
its
that?
core. I think it's like at its core, it's like personal agency. Like
Yeah,
you are you.
it's an awesome way to look at it. So, guys, the book is called Remote Works Managing for Freedom, Flexibility, and Focus. Pick it up on Amazon. Is there a website or a social media channel that you recommend people to look you up on?
So I'm most active on LinkedIn. So you can just give me a follow there. And we do have remoteworksbook.com. So if you want to learn more information about the book and other content, we have tons of free resources on there as well. And so you can go check that out.
Love it. Great stuff. Allie Green, thank you so much for your time today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Remember, guys, $1 million book will lead to $1 million life. Right on.